The world of Yu-Gi-Oh! Is full of interesting and colorful characters. Their personalities shine through in their fashion, deck, and playstyle. It defines them. So today, we're going to be looking at the top 10 in a specific category and place them within it in an order I see fit. This is the Duelist Alliance.
I am blown away by the reception that my most recent video has received. You all have inspired me to continue working hard on this kind of content, so thank you for that. It means the world to me. When we last left off, we were discussing the top 10 most terrifying duelists in all of classic Yu-Gi-Oh! A few housekeeping rules were set in order, so let me just give some reminders. Number 1, this is just my list. It's all opinion-based, meaning that if you guys have a choice that you think should be somewhere else or a completely different list entirely, I'd love to see it in the comments below. Number 2, these duelists are just that. They have to have some association with the game of Duel Monsters. This can be playing the card game, participating in some kind of side game like Dungeon Dice Monsters, or being closely affiliated with the game in some way, shape, or form. Lastly, in certain situations when duelists could use a fresh coat of paint for their deck, because we've had so many new cards and this could help boost their playstyle, I'll suggest new real-world cards to match their aesthetic and motifs. Additionally, in certain situations, I'll create what-if cards, which will bolster their previously established playstyle and deck with a new card or two in order to give them the leg up in modern day dueling. And of course, remember to like, comment, and share this video with any of your Yu-Gi-Oh! Loving friends. With that in mind, this is part 2 of the top 10 most terrifying duelists in all of classic Yu-Gi-Oh!
Number 5, Strings. So, okay, Strings is an interesting situation of a character in that he is technically not a character at all, but more so a vessel for another character to occupy. In the dub, he's this mime who just vibes until Merrick needs him. Simple enough. That, is until I did my research. See, I was curious if he had any backstory to him that 4Kids changed or removed. You know, how like the Illusion Master I talked about earlier was actually just some random dude and not the evil soul of Kaiba given new form. And boy howdy, does Strings have some details left out in the dub. That is to say, in the original characterization of Strings, he is a guy that has sealed away his own consciousness after he has killed his parents in Minecraft. So anyway, so Strings works under Merrick, but not in the traditional sense, more like a doll for Merrick to inhabit with his mind control abilities of the Millennium Rod. We see this being a ability that he can use and does so on Taya and Joey during the Battle City arc. But Strings is like the ideal puppet, one that doesn't fight against the mind control and has no reason to. It's for this reason alone that Slifer the Sky Dragon is placed in Strings' deck. In any other situation where a rare hunter would be given the opportunity to wield a god card, there is a high probability that they could just want it for themselves and get power hungry. That is not going to happen when Strings is basically just you in VR. On top of that, Strings' dueling style, which, let's be real here, is really just regular Merrick's style and techniques, is interesting, and will be further expanded upon in the future matches when Yami Merrick is at the helm. So Slifer the Sky Dragon, my dude, my favorite god card, and the reason that my boy Jaden gets to live in a tool shed. This baddie has an overwhelming effect to decrease the attack of any monster summoned by the opponent by an insane 2,000. And if that wasn't enough, if that effect then reduces that monster's attack power to 0, the summoned monster is automatically destroyed by Slifer's second mouth. I don't think I need to tell you how terrifying the in-anime version of this effect is, especially in the early 2000s, where normal summoning monsters under 2,000 attack points was the norm. Combine that with the fact that Slifer's attack power is based off the number of cards in your hand times 1,000, and this strategy of drawing cards that Merrick has come up with is extremely dangerous territory for anyone that faces him, specifically one Yugi Moto. But if a wicked attack power wasn't enough, Strings uses Revival Jam along with a trap that forces Yugi's monsters to redirect any attack that they would declare to the jam. Revival Jam does what it says on the tin. It's a slime-like creature that in the anime will revive itself instantly upon destruction by battle card effect. It's weak, so no Orichalcos Giga shenanigans going on here, but it is perfect for redirecting battles to itself, keeping Slifer safe from harm's way. This is like having the T-1000, that liquid Terminator, as your personal bodyguard, and having Godzilla shooting its concentrated heat breaths at anyone who considers nightmares even sneezing your way, the ultimate attack and the ultimate defense, standing side by side, all played out in a perfect strategy to defeat anyone who is not Yugi Muto. See, this leads to some real nightmare situations that only someone like Yugi, who loves to get his opponents into infinite loot combos, can overcome. Yugi combines Slifer's second mouth effect and Strings' revival jam against itself, taking control of it for a turn even when it's sent to the graveyard, so that Card of Safe Return, which forces Merrick to draw a card every time revival jam is brought back, in tandem with Slifer's second mouth effect, which is also mandatory, creates an infinite loop where revival jam is destroyed, which then causes it to come back, which then causes Merrick to draw a card, but Slifer's mandatory second mouth effect destroys it again. You can see where we're going. Slifer's power gets infinitesimally insane in this duel, but because deck out is a thing, Strings loses the duel. Strings may be a bland yet terrifying character, but you can't tell me that Strings is not a TikTok fashion icon. I can think of at least a few friends of mine who had decided to rock some eyeliner and get several piercings because of this dude. Absolutely a fashion icon, a gateway drug of drip. As for a deck for Strings to utilize, the Grey Dolls were a previously mentioned slimy card type that I thought would visually line up with the Revival Jam, but since they don't reflect the oppressive feeling of Slifer and Revival Jam constantly putting pressure in aggression and also constantly rebuilding a board, and the fact that I already gave Grey Dolls to Kaiba's Ghoul, I think that the best choice would be leaning into an aqua and water based deck, and nothing suits water and recovery more than the tier elements. The main monster of this deck is an evil dude who forces mermaids to fuse together in his ungodly experiments by activating fusion effects in the graveyard, leading to him eventually fusing with them to create an even more oppressive boss monster. This is really cool parallels to the fact that eventually Yami Merrick, who is controlling Merrick, who is controlling Strings, fuses with his god card as well. Moving back to the strategy side of things, because fusion summons through this deck are utilized by having cards activate effects in the graveyard, Strings can use resources already on his field to make powerful plays. He can continue to build up his hand and allow Slifer the Sky Dragon to gain attack points, and even when the tier elements get destroyed, they can activate their effect to bring a new field of monsters out right away. If you've ever played against tier elements even slightly casually, you will realize that this aggressive and oppressive strategy that rebuilds its boards quickly after being wiped out is such a strong contender to the parallels of Revival Jam bringing itself back to life over and over. And as someone who has single-handedly played Dark Magician on Master Duel during peak tier element format, let me tell you that Yugi would feel absolutely stressed against this matchup. It just feels like the right situation for this kind of character.
Number 4, Yami Merrick. Hey everyone, it's Yami Merrick. Look, Yami Merrick is here. Yami Merrick is Yu-Gi-Oh's equivalent to Jigsaw. He's not, ooh, spooky. He's more like, let me torture you slowly, scary. And to be fair, he is actually terrifying. I mean, just the fact that he was planning on physically murdering his dad and Odeon is wild enough. Add to that the fact that in the manga, when he defeats Mai, it's not sand that's trickling down in the hourglass that she's going to be drowned in, but actually flesh-eating scarabs. Wow. Yeah, a little bit more spooky than Bones is wearing a Halloween mask. And let's not forget about the moment that he basically murdered Joey Wheeler, but nothing is more horrifying than his shuffling technique.
I don't even need to look at my cards while I shuffle them, Pharaoh!
There's not much to say about Yami Merrick other than in his very short amount of screen time, partaking in about 4 or 5 duels, he really leaves an impression. He is the reason that Yu-Gi-Oh villains have that nightmarish reaction face that we've seen so many times since Yami Merrick's appearance, from Sartorius to Yubel to Rex to Paradox and so on. There's a reason that when people think Yu-Gi-Oh, it's usually only up to Battle City. Sure, Darts is great, but his composed nature is a far cry for interesting character when standing next to Yami Merrick. Look, Darts has some of the most powerful cards in the anime, including the nightmarish Orichalco's Gigas, and a monster with infinite attack points, and I still feel like Merrick would cheese a win against him. That's how much terror Yami Merrick puts into me when stacked against other Yu-Gi-Oh villains. Let's face it, he is a hard act to follow. One thing that I don't like about the video game's portrayal of Yami Merrick is that he always is paired with the Gravekeeper's cards. Yes, that aesthetic works for the regular Merrick, given as that is what he did in childhood and what his family lineage is for, but Yami Merrick is his own beast, and I feel like his deck would reflect that. With the advent of real-world Egyptian God Slime released a few years back, I'm happy to see him getting more support. And yes, Winged Dragon of Ra having all of its anime effects is great. It just stinks that they have to be divided amongst so many different cards just to get a glimpse of the power that it held within the anime. Let's get one thing straight about Yami Merrick. He is a sadist. From the demonic-looking Hell Polymer, cards like Visor Shock and Nightmare Wheel, who are basically glorified torture devices, and of course his signature monster Lava Golem, who combines these aesthetics together
together. He loves to see the fear and suffering of those he faces. I think that things like this are what he lives for. Lava Golem is a prime example of a card that sees regular play even in modern day Yu-Gi-Oh! As a way to deal with very difficult cards on the opponent's board, since you have to tribute them to summon him. Winged Dragon of Ra Sphere mode takes that a step further, tributing 3 monsters on either side of the field, hopefully all on your opponent, to summon it. Then you can simply replace it with Ra's other forms to capitalize. When I think of his aesthetic, Hell Polymer and Lava Golem definitely stand out as visual breadwinners. So to match that motif, along with giving him a monster who has more attack power and can rival the Winged Dragon of Ra, I've given him the Dogmatic archetype, specifically focused on the ritual theming. Now, another archetype I was considering was Burning Abyss. Yes, we've got all of the creatures from Dante's Inferno here, but I feel like Burning Abyss is about Dante, a traveler of the Burning Abyss, and his harrowing journey through it. It's not about the spooky monsters that we see, it's about Dante. And I think that although it does have creepy monsters thrown around, Dante himself is more of a heroic character. Whereas with the Dogmatic archetype, we see characters who used to hold their composure now changing and morphing into something very dark and evil, just like Yami Merrick. See, in the card game, the Dogmatic allure is all about our girl Ecclesia, realizing that the people in her home country are more corrupt than she realizes, ultimately leading to nightmare creatures being called upon through tears in reality, taking the form of the 4000 attack point monster Dogmatica Albiazoa, who absolutely fits the motif of nightmare fuel we know and love to see come out of Yami Merrick, and carries a handful of effects perfect for his playstyle of forcing the opponent to choose how they want to suffer. Let's just say it lends itself to a gimmick of ripping resources away from the opponent, either by wiping away fusion monsters off Yugi's board during Merrick's turn, or if there's nothing for him to get rid of, for every 2 fusion monsters in Yugi's fusion deck, Merrick can rip away a card in Yugi's hand, dwindling his resources further. At minimum, if Yugi has all of the cards we saw in Battle City in his extra deck, then that's 1 card, given that Dark Paladin and Chimera the Flying Mythical Beast are in there. But let's also consider the fact that Yugi has Gaia the Dragon Champion and Black Skull Dragon, which although I see as more of a Joey card, would make perfect sense during this arc, since Yugi is borrowing Red Eyes during Battle City, and was seen using Summon Skull against Seeker, the first rare hunter we encounter in the series. So that would mean that Yugi's losing up to 2 cards in his hand every time it's Merrick's turn, and losing resources in this game is very hard to recover from. Finally, Merrick's plan to summon Ra is to revive it from the graveyard with reincarnation cards such as Monster Reborn, so that he can circumvent the cost of tributing it. And using Ra as tribute material from his hand to summon Albiazoa would not only provide him a hard tribute to summon this behemoth of a monster, but also shove a golden fried chicken right where it needs to go. You can also include the previous Dogmatica cards, since Ecclesia, realizing that her world was not as pure as she thought it was, would be a good reflection for regular Merrick to discover about his darker half, who actually doesn't care about him, but rather wants to steal and use his body in the way that Merrick uses strings. But we are not including the branded and fusion-focused side of this archetype. They are great, but I feel that they strip away a lot of the symbolism that we see here with the character motif. So instead, we'll be keeping the Winged Dragon of Ra cards, Burn cards, and Lava Golem to keep his aesthetic. Lastly, we'll add some gear frame cards. Although Psy-Frame gears are supposed to be armor parts for the Psy-Frame driver, I can't help but feel like they do look a little bit like Visor Shock torture device cards. Like maybe Driver can handle the pain that these cards cause to equip onto him because of his psychic typing, but normal humans would not be able to. And if we're looking at synchro summoning, Psy-Frame Omega does also rip a card out of the opponent's hand during their turn. So Merrick would be removing 3 cards out of Yugi's hand during each turn, slowing down any chance of a comeback to an impossible place of recovery from there. This specific deck retrain took a lot of thought to build around, so let me know what you guys think.
Number 3, Scott Irving. Okay, this one gets a little weird, but he does technically interact with duelists in a game-like setting, so I'm going to give him a soft pass. Besides that, he's in a confusing situation even more than Haishin. Okay, let's break this down. Here are 3 photos of 3 different characters within Yu-Gi-Oh! The first is known as Engineer A. He is the primordial ooze that the others branch from. Think Charizard for X and Y evolutions. Same base, different paths. On one hand, we have Chief Kuwabara. He is one of Seto's most loyal research scientists when it comes to the creation of the dual disc technology. In fact, Chief Kuwabara is the one that created the dual disc technology known as Solid Vision. I know everyone asked this question as a kid, but do you ever wonder why when a monster inflicts damage to a player that it looks like they're actually getting hurt even though it's supposed to be a hologram? So yeah, that's not just the players pretending to take damage, at least not in the source material. That's Solid Vision, the blending of holograms and real-world physics. We don't get that concept in the dub, probably for censorship reasons to avoid more implications of actual harm befalling a character. That brings a lot more weight to the threat Seto presented to Yugi at the top of Pegasus's castle in their Duelist Kingdom rematch. The Solid Vision technology actually would cause the blast from the impact to push him back, genuinely leading to his death, as opposed to him saying, if you declare
share an attack with your Celtic Guardian, I will actively and manually walk off this ledge. It's a small change, but it has a bigger implication. Kaiba is no longer the one in charge of the situation. It's really absolutely Yugi. There is a chance in the subbed version of this encounter that Yugi's attack will not lead to a blast that gets Kaiba knocked off of the ledge of the Duelist Kingdom Tower, but that small percentage of a chance does imply Yugi would be the direct cause of this situation and not make it to where Kaiba is simply throwing a tantrum. Back on track, Chief Kuwabara invented the dual disc technology along with the dueling computer that Kaiba faces against to test Obelisk's power, along with creating the full solid vision opponent and realm that Kaiba duels against in Dark Side of Dimensions, which takes the form of an AI version of the Pharaoh. All that was made by this one dude, who is basically the closest thing to a caring father figure that Seto has in his life. He's probably the most loyal person to the Kaiba brothers outside of each other, and frankly, he deserves a lot more praise than he gets, especially because he's also basically in charge of running the entire Battle City tournament, which is wild to have on a resume. I mean, he's basically running as the TO of Battle City. If any issues go wrong or anything weird comes up on a duel disc, he knows and reports it to Kaiba. He's in charge of the staff. He's basically got head judge for a Konami-sanctioned event right next to his PhD, which it should be. Anyway, this is Scott Irving, the main baddie of the GameCube exclusive Yu-Gi-Oh! Falsebound Kingdom. Scott the Waz here is a video game equivalent to Chief Kuwabara, but instead of being a loyal researching scientist seeking the potentials of solid vision to benefit Kaiba Corporation, he seeks the power of the Egyptian god cards and wishes to use their string for his own for world domination. He leaves Kaiba Corp to create his own company, SIC, or the Scott Irving Corporation, taking his knowledge from Kaiba Corp technology to create a new virtual world akin to the one that Yugi and Kaiba get trapped in when having to face off against the Big Five in the filler-ish arc that takes place after Duelist Kingdom. Scott traps the characters in a virtual world known as Kingdom, where they use duel monsters to battle in real-time strategy RPG-like gameplay to escape and prevent Haishin from Haishin! What are you doing here, man? Scram! Get out of here! He's like a cockroach. Other cockroach? Oh, great, now Weevil's here too. Anyway, Haishin is just a program in this game created by Scott, along with the power of the virtual world to bring back Dark Knight and his true form, the card Majin, Darkness, Nightmare. So once again, we have to face these guys, all because Scott here feels like he deserves a pay raise. Honestly, I don't blame him. So Kaiba, Joey, or Yugi, depending on which campaign you're playing through, are tasked with taking on Scott Irving in order to stop him. Honestly, given the quality range in the art assets of this game when it comes to the talking heads, and the fact that Scott here looks great while some of these characters look like they're from a Game Boy game, I would say that this game was quickly slapdashed together just using assets that they had from Yu-Gi-Oh! Forbidden Memories, Yu-Gi-Oh! The Duelist of the Roses, and so on and so on. It just makes sense. At this point, Yu-Gi-Oh! Games are coming out pretty much every year in some way, shape, or form, so it's really cool to see them utilize this to create something with the IP that's not akin to Duel Monsters, but the execution seems to be a little lacking. It's insane though. Scott is so terrifying because he's so willing to do anything to get what he wants. He traps you guys in cyberspace and makes you play Yu-Gi-Oh! The Falsebound Kingdom, which is objectively one of the worst Yu-Gi-Oh! Games ever, and I am not going to deny that being a terrifying fact in and of itself. I think there's something so eerie about taking a character like Chief Kuwabara, aka Engineer A, who we've always seen in the background as one of Kaiba's most loyal comrades, and yet seeing him turn heel like this in such a random way, it's creepy. It doesn't help that when the game ends, the building that all of this takes place in burns down to the ground, with Scott's body never being found. No sign of escape, no sign of his body. It's so ominous. We don't know his fate, and because this is a video game that's not canon to the mainline series, we really won't. Anyway, the reason that this one's technically cheating is because Irving doesn't actually duel, but rather uses duel monsters against you in his RPG-like style game, Kingdom, which kind of is like Dungeon Dice Monsters using duel monsters for their IP, although these monsters were depicted in 5,000-year-old ancient Egyptian artwork, probably means that they are fair use designs in the world of Yu-Gi-Oh! The way that Snow White and the fairy tales are. And get out of here with that! Get that out of here before Walt sees it! Number 2, the weapon manufacturer Gozaburo Kaiba. Throughout the earlier years of the Yu-Gi-Oh! Anime, we always heard about Seto and Mokuba's being orphaned, but we never got to see anything further than that until we saw Gozaburo. That terrifying cyberspace floating head in the sky. Get out of here! here, Scott? What was I saying? Oh, yeah, Gozaburo is one of my favorite side mission bosses in the entire franchise. Technically, Noah is the main villain of this arc, but everything that Noah does is a byproduct of Gozaburo. See, before Kaiba Corp was owned by Seto, it was a weapons manufacturer. Kaiba Corp is the company that produced tools of war to the highest bidder. We see in a later filler season the effects that this had on people in other countries, where during a flashback, one of the Kaiba Corp tanks kills a younger brother of one of the henchmen of Darts that season. He desires to get his revenge on the dead Gozaburo, leading him to pursue Seto as his target of hate instead. It's wild to see the sins of a father storyline, but that's honestly more of Yu-Gi-Oh than people realize. It's just instead of your father, it's like your old ancient self or whatever. Returning focus to Gozaburo himself, there's something a bit heartbreaking about him. Yes, he's a vile monster who mass produces weapons for other countries to bid on, but he's trying to use Seto as nothing more than a pawn to run his company. And now, yes, he's trying to take over Seto's real body and leave the virtual world in it so he can reign control of Kaiba Corp once again. But the whole reason he created this virtual world was for his dying son, following the result of a car accident which left him in a critical state. Gozaburo was a harsh father who made Noah study, just like he did Seto, but Noah actually enjoyed the challenge. Noah himself could have continued the Kaiba Corp legacy in any direction, whether games or weapons, and it would have most likely been a huge success, but that got ripped away from him, trapped in a virtual world where he was unable to age. Sure, Gozaburo was harsh, but I don't think that any father, with even the small interaction we see between him and Noah, would ever want that for his son. It probably broke him and pushed him even further into his work to try and succeed, to make things work, because now they have to. And then, after abusing Seto, pushing him to his limits, and having him then gain control of Gozaburo's business, kicking him out of the company, he goes and commits, well, let's just say that there's a reason that he doesn't have a body to come back to in the real world. I'm not saying that you should feel sorry for Gozaburo. I just find it horrifying that his fear and hate led him to try and snatch the body of his own adopted son because he felt that he was that wronged. Canon events aside, perhaps if he had raised Seto with a more gentle hand, this wouldn't have happened, but that's hard to say given Seto's competitive personality. The nature of Gozaburo being a filler villain means that it's really not clear on whether you can say that Gozaburo's harsh parenting made Kaiba come out the way he is, or if instead Seto's harsh nature to want to always one-up people is what made him eventually cause Gozaburo to go down the path of ending himself. Noah and Seto didn't want to be this military arms dealer, but that's what Gozaburo wanted for them, and it's sad. It's heartbreaking that that would be what ultimately pitted them against each other, to see who was deemed as the better son. It's even sadder when you realize that Noah and Seto are supposed to be the same age, but due to the nature of being trapped in cyberspace, Noah is locked, with no ability to grow and mature until he was forced to when he saw what he did to Yugi and his friends. Gozaburo made Noah a monster, but Noah grew, and in that short time he matured and realized he was able to die with grace. In a sacrifice that made me genuinely want to see Noah again by the end of its conclusion, which makes this so much more heartbreaking, because Noah isn't real. Not in the anime, and not even within the world of the anime. Noah's story will never get a follow-up. It's just that of a child having to kill their father to protect his new friends because of the mistakes that he made. Gozaburo's dueling style is an interesting one as well. He's not as skilled at the game, but he does apply his knowledge of being a pro chess player to dueling. He knows about Exodia, so just like everything else, he tries to use its might as his own, mutating Exodia into Exodia Necros, an undying and yet weaker version of Exodia the Forbidden One, who, due to Gozaburo's desires to create an ultimate being while using shortcuts, is easily overcome by Seto once its weaknesses are discovered. But it's not what goes on during the duel that's horrifying. It's what he does after his boss monster has been defeated. Gozaburo removes his human skin and shows what his true form in cyberspace is, a phantom, a creature of purple, swirling energy, wanting so desperately to snatch Kaiba's body that it's willing to destroy all of cyberspace just to do it. Gozaburo is willing to use brute force to worm his way to victory, but thanks to the sacrifices of a now matured and kind-hearted Noah, Gozaburo is unable to succeed and trapped in cyberspace forever. That is until the gang realizes that he has channeled his rage into a physical explosion and is now a literal demon of fire, trying to trap and kill everyone aboard Seto's blimp, only for Seto to flex so hard that he kills Gozaburo, who has already died twice at this point by Seto's direct and indirect actions. My man Seto Kaiba has so much drip that it is insane. Given that Gozaburo's deck is themed around speedrunning Exodia Necros, I feel like it would make perfect sense for the new support to be centered around that specifically. Although the in-anime Necros is extremely horrifying, its real-world counterpart is what we call in the card game hot garbage. It wasn't even a viable strategy when it came out in the early 2000s. Trust me, I know, I tried. Let me break this down for y'all. Exodia Necros' requirements are that you have to have all 5 pieces of Exodia in the graveyard in order to even attempt to summon it. It can only be summoned by the effects of Contract with Exodia, spell card that literally does nothing after you use it to summon Exodia Necros, and well, additionally, Necros' weaknesses include that of being able to be destroyed by any monster effect at all. Oh hi, Maneater Bug! And the fact that if any Exodia card is moved out of the graveyard, it auto dies. It just, well, it's dog water. It's basically the worst version of Orichalcos Gigas yet. Yes, it will not die by battle, and yes, it will gain attack through its effect every turn, but it does so slowly, and it requires 5 specific cards to not only be in the graveyard in order to summon it, but remain in the graveyard, because with any of them being taken out, it automatically kills himself. But fret not, I've got just the card that Gozaburo needs. Get this, a trap card that for 1,000 life points per piece will let you put any loose Exodia pieces from your hand, deck, or field into your graveyard. Then, if you have all 5 pieces of Exodia at the end of this part of the effect, you can special summon Exodia Necros ignoring summoning conditions. Now you don't have to worry about using that Contract with Exodia spell card to bring him out. A Necros summoned through this effect would gain an extra 1,000 attack points because man, that boy is weak at the start. He would be unaffected and cannot be targeted by effects your opponent controls, such as monsters, spells, or traps. Bye, Maneater Bug. And lastly, if an Exodia piece would be moved out of the graveyard, banished, put back into the deck, special summon, turn to the hand, you name it, you can banish this trap card from your graveyard to negate that effect. That way, Necros will have at least a few safety lines so that it won't destroy itself simply because your opponent played Monster Reborn to get rid of one of the parts from your grave. That should cover the main weaknesses needed to protect this bad boy, while still making it able to be sacrificed by something like Lava Golem, in order to make it at least have some removability by an opponent, giving old Merrick here the upper hand. The reason that I like this is that it would still require a little effort, and think that it's mostly fair is that in the anime, since players only have 4,000 life points, Gozaburo, even sending only 3 Exodia pieces to the graveyard via this effect, would require his life points to drop down all the way to 1,000, making his monster easy to attack over if you have the chance and finish him off through damage that way. That is if you can get through the wall of Exodia, but if you have a burn damage card, or if you're just able to beat over it a little bit, you'll be able to do enough chip damage to take Gozaburo out in the first place. Then it won't matter that his monster is invincible, you'll just beat Gozaburo before he can win. Is it easy? No. But this is 2023. If Red Eye's Dark Dragoon can exist, I think that this is a fair enough way to make this card viable. Anyway, it's time for my final pick, so here we are. Friendly reminder that this is my list, so if you have a different top 10 or even wanted to include any characters from GX or 5Ds, the manga, or so on, please feel free to do so. I plan on making a future list with those characters, so who knows, maybe you'll be able to inspire my choices for the next video. Anyway, the #1 most terrifying duelist in classic Yu-Gi-Oh! It's Panic!
And next you'll say, I kind of remember that guy, yeah.
There's a lot of reasons why I chose this guy when I was compiling this list, that when compared to the rest of these others, seems like he's a bit out of left field, but just hear me out. He's not here to take over the world, bring back Nightmare, or claim the power of the God cards. He's here specifically because he likes torturing people. I mean, everyone else on this list is horrifying in their own ways, but it's all actions that are more like means to an end goal, you know? I mean, yes, Yami Merrick is terrifying, but he's doing it to get the God cards. Yes, Pegasus is doing all this awful stuff, but it's in order to bring back his dead wife.
I miss my wife.
Yugi boy.
And so on, and so on, and so on. With Panic, he's simply living the dream. Or Nightmare. Not you! Get out of here! Interesting but relevant side note, Panic is the only one on this list to have a whole Music to Duel By song specifically dedicated to them. For my younger viewers, or those just uninitiated, McDonald's had originally released a run of Yu-Gi-Oh! Themed Happy Meals back in the early 2000s, which included some very interesting character song CDs, which, to be quite fair, is an oddity in and of itself. What is a character song CD? They are this super popular thing for animes in Japan, at least in the early 2000s, and were mostly seen in magical girl anime, such as Tokyo Mew Mew, or even more shonen series like G Gundam. They include songs sung by or directly inspired by certain characters, and even have characters talking in conversation conversation as if we're watching a lost episode. Now, the Music to Duel by CDs are not nearly as thorough as what I described, only having about 3 songs on each of them to promote the new anime at the time, and came along with a specific McDonald's booster pack, which had cards exclusive to them until reprints were more readily available. In fact, Panic has a monster specifically released in this promotional set. None of these cards were competitively viable, but they were cool to have, and Panic is a character who has a song specifically dedicated to him on the CD called Panic. This is peak 2000s 4Kids pop, akin to that from the Pokemon CDs created around the same time, with the very millennial title of To Be a Master, spelt exactly the way that you see here. In fact, the musical stylings of the song To Be a Master found on the CD of the same name is very similar in feeling and structure musically to that of I'm Not Gonna Panic, and there's a very important reason. It's the same singer in both songs. Take a listen.
Oh, you want to be a Pokemon master?
I got to be the one, the only one who can withstand the test and be the best. To strive, keep up the fight, be a master.
Here in the shadows, phantom of the night, attack without warning, extinguish all light. Brave the darkness, make my stand right here. No matter how you come at me, I'll show no fear.
This is an artist by the name of Russell Velasquez, who is most certainly the musical backbone of every 90s kid that grew up watching Saturday morning cartoons on either Kids WB or the Foxbox. Back to Panic proper. He uses his shadowy castle of dark illusions in order to surprise his opponent by keeping his cards a secret until it's time to strike. Now again, this duel happens in the Duelist Kingdom era of the anime and manga, meaning that this was before a lot of the official rule set was established, leading to a lot of made-up mumbo-jumbo here that is absolute nonsense. But the way that Panic sells this is so perfect, helped immensely by the excellent performance via his English voice actor David Moo. You've definitely heard of Moo's voice before if you've ever watched the 4Kids version of One Piece, where he plays the lollipop warrior Sanji. But Panic's voice is so terrifying that even now, having known that fact, I can definitely hear it, yes, but I would have never believed it at first. And I'm usually pretty good about playing the, hey, that's this so-and-so from that game or anime voice.
When did Luffy start having complete thoughts such as this? This beast will win the entire match for me! King of Yamimakai! But don't take my word for it! Powered up with the field power bonus that all my monsters get from the night. King of Yamimakai, destroy his curse of dragon! Electro Shock Attack!
Panic is the embodiment of every 90s anime mini-boss henchman to help establish a power scaling for the audience to understand, so we can further comprehend the real bad guy's power. What do I mean by all this? Well, okay, at this point in the anime, we know that Mai Valentine is an extremely strong duelist. Although she has yet to duel Yugi at this point, she has dueled Rex and Joey, proving a challenge to both. So seeing her easily be defeated by Panic before we even get to see what happened put into perspective just how strong he is. He sets himself up as a real threat so well just because of this power scale. He fits in beautifully next to the mini-bosses of more fist-fighting and weapon-wielding battle shonen, more akin to things of Kenshin or G Gundam, and does it in a fraction of the time that other characters need. He fits in so well with his role of being this bloodthirsty henchman of darkness, especially when contrasting his vibes to that of Pegasus and his eventual tunes being revealed, showing that brute force and power isn't the only way to overwhelm an opponent. It really lets both styles of anime villainry breathe and show that being a master of brute force and power isn't all that makes you the strongest. There's so much that I love about his design. In Japan, he's actually referred to as the player killer of darkness, which is where the PK comes from that we see on his outfit. Until this point in the series, we've seen how hard Yugi, Joey, Mai, and other duelists around the tournament work in order to get just the handful of star chips that they've acquired. And yet, Panic wears 2 extra large gauntlets, both dripped in star chips, all from the fallen opponents he's defeated. When I see this design and I see the way that he taunts his opponents, I can get a sense that this is not like how Bones was wearing a haunting mask in order to make his opponents drop their locator cards. No, I genuinely believe that Panic dueled and won against every single person that those star chips belonged to. He puts so much stress on Yugi in their duel, and the uncanny nature of Panic carries over into his monsters. See, See, in modern Yu-Gi-Oh, 99.9% of all monsters within the card game have a nice clean attack and defense point. 2,000, 3,000, 1,000, very few exceptions. But with Panic, that's a completely different story. Each of his monsters have one, if not both, strange integers of their stats that to this day have yet to be seen without very rare exceptions. This is due to them being mathematical nightmares, which would make the already complicated tournament play even more frustrating. But yet there he is, being that dude. He loves it. Physically, he is an overwhelming threat, and massive. The man is a hunting machine. It's not until Yugi realizes that his Swords of Revealing Light is the only thing holding Panic's ace card, the Castle of Dark Illusions, up, that Yugi decides to chill out. Not until that moment does Yugi even know he's winning. That's how much Panic got into Yami's head. By the way, Yami means darkness. I mean, that's why we call them Yami Yugi, Yami Merrick, and Yami Bakura. It's a prefix, not a name. But Panic is playing the darkness game better than those boys repping the title. My man Panic running circles around our pow-poo-headed looking main character, and it ain't even funny. Additionally, Panic is just straight up like a crazy person. He is willing to kill an opponent just to meet his objective of eliminating Yugi. Panic loses, and he just decides, screw it, I've already got your legs shackled to this stadium, why don't I just set you on fire? I need you to understand this. Yugi is kept alive because of his Millennium powers. The puzzle protects him. It creates like a little barrier of sorts around him that we see here. But in any other circumstance other than Yugimoto and his magic ghost friend, Panic was straight up gonna melt a person in order to claim 2 star chips. That is straight up crazy. Even Yami Merrick does not finish the job when it comes to trying to kill someone. Look at Odeon. He wanted to end him because Odeon is the only person that can seal Merrick's dark side up. But when he got the chance, he just doesn't do it. My dude, if you think that Odeon is trash to be taken out, you need to know Waste Management is at your front door right now and they are not waiting around. But Panic, no. He is a walking, killing machine. And without Yami literally mind-crushing this man to death, Panic would have continued on his payroll-funded onslaught. If I was going to just give Panic a new deck, it would have to be something to foreshadow future events, while also representing a very cool amount of terror that he brings. And I don't think that any other deck in the game would meet the requirements of fitting this aesthetic better than those found within the Layer of Darkness deck. See, part of Panic's gimmicks are that his monsters are hidden in shadows. That's why he only duels at night. So, let's bring the concept of dueling in darkness into any situation. The Layer of Darkness field spell turns all monsters on the field into dark monsters. Additionally, the person who owns the field spell can sacrifice the opponent's dark monsters in order to activate the costs of their own spell, traps, and monster effect. This provides Panic an advantage for dwindling the opponent's resources while activating powerful effects all on his own that would normally cost him sacrificing monsters to activate. Additionally, this field spell creates tokens, so not only is Panic getting more fodder to manipulate and tribute, but he's creating monsters that he can now attack into and crush easily. There's a lot of monsters that fall within the Lady of Lament archetype that goes alongside this deck, but to make things simple, they sacrifice dark monsters in order to activate effects, which is done so much more easier when you have your field spell out to sacrifice your opponent. The interesting thing is that they all work with the virus-themed trap cards, similar to Seto's Crush card virus trap. They are all powerful and can control the opponent's hand, field, and deck, and would be great foreshadowing. Think about it. Panic in his duel against Yugi could use these less powerful but still effective virus trap cards and bring up, if only I had the final virus card. Crush card virus's power is all I would need to defeat you. That sets up a lot of things. Now, when Seto finally uses that card, it makes the moment that much more intense, while also showing that Seto's power is stronger than that of Panic's. Lastly, for the Layer of Darkness deck are the 2 most aesthetic pieces for dear old Panic: the Warden of the Darkness, who single-handedly lets you set up your field spell, and the Darkest Diablos, the boss monster of this deck, who has some detrimentally powerful effects. Firstly, it can summon itself whenever a dark monster except Darkest Diablos is tributed for the cost of a card effect. That means that you can cheat him out super quickly from either your hand or the graveyard. And you can activate the other effect, which is, during your turn, you can sacrifice a dark monster in order to have an opponent return a card in their hand to the top or bottom of their deck, stripping away any resources and potentially setting them them back an entire turn. This is an extremely oppressive card that can, I think, give Panic the perfect winning strategy. Now, I did make some what-if cards for Panic to use, but to be honest, this video is already super long, and I feel like that could be something to do in maybe a fun Patreon video idea, something for the more sweaty of us Yu-Gi-Oh card fans to enjoy. I not only do these what-if lists style videos, but am currently working on the first episode of my live-action Yu-Gi-Oh series, so feel free to check that out too. Your support in either side of this means the world to me, and I really am grateful. This list video has been a blast to make. If you enjoyed this video, let me know. Please leave a like, share it with your friends, whether casual or competitive Yu-Gi-Oh fans. I'm eager to read all of your lists, and let me know what you would like to see in the future. Till next time, it's your move.